talk about the supplies that we will use for today's project, which is sewing the Christmas tree napkins. The first thing you will want is 2 contrasting fabrics, and you would want to have at least 2 fat quarters or a half a yard of fabric of each fabric. And I recommend having things that will contrast well against one another. It just looks better in the finished napkin. In addition to our fabrics, we're going to want a contrasting thread. We will need fabric scissors, straight pins. A rotary cutter is nice if you have it. The disappearing ink pen is also really nice for marking out the pattern. If you don't have the disappearing ink pen to draw a shape of the pattern, what you can do is just pin the paper pattern to your fabric and cut around it that way. You will also need a sewing machine, point turner, and a steam iron. As part of today's project, we are going to make our own pattern. And to do this, you will need some kind of paper. You could use parchment paper, you could use wax paper, you could use a paper grocery bag that you cut and open up. I have this brown paper that I buy in a roll. It is used for wrapping packages. I like it for making my patterns because it's heavy duty, and I have a tendency to make my patterns and save them. Once we have our paper to use for the pattern, we will then need a ruler. We'll need something like this nice triangle ruler that will let us mark 45-degree angles on the pattern itself. We'll need scissors that we can use to cut paper, and then we'll need a pen or a pencil or something, and you can see that I have tied a piece of string to it, and this is an 8-inch segment, and that's going to allow us to draw our pattern today. Our first step in constructing the Christmas tree napkin is to make our pattern, and you can see I've cut this nice length of paper, and the first thing I'm going to do is to just locate a spot somewhere in the middle. It doesn't have to be a perfect center point, but what you want to do is make sure that you have space on either side of your pen, and what you're going to do is just kind of hold that end flush with the paper, and then you're going to draw all the way around in a half circle. And that's your pattern, and now we'll cut it out. When our pattern piece is cut out, we will measure 10 inches from the left edge and draw that straight line. And then we'll draw 2 45-degree angles from the point, and those are the fold lines. Our next step is to cut the fabric, but before I lay out the fabric to cut and show you how to do that, I want to talk to you about selecting your fabric. And you will make your life 100% easier if you go with something that is a non-directional print. And what that means is it doesn't matter which way you look at the fabric, there's no obvious direction to it. And this is a really fun non-directional print. And as far as picking your contrasting colors to go together, I always like a solid with my print. I feel like it doesn't compete, and it lets something like this really fun little rocket pattern show through. This is kind of like, they're like little antique looking rockets that are sort of like Christmas ornaments. So I really thought this was fun. But the way that I arrived at the blue was because a couple of things. Blue is a complementary to yellow, and this is predominantly yellow, so I thought that would really pop the yellow. And when you look at the selvage of your fabric, you will see, it's not generally quite as fancy as this, but you'll see markings on your selvage with different colors. And this is like the old school printing to show you all of the colors that are used in the print. So all of these colors are in this one print, which that's kind of crazy if you think about it. But what I do is if I'm kind of stuck on what I should match, I will look on my selvage and find colors in the selvage, and then I will go find the solid to match. And you can see that this and this shade are pretty darn close. And I had this blue in my stash, so that works really well. You know, you could also go with the green, the red. It's kind of what you like. This like light blue is really pretty. But, you know, I had this dark and it works really well. And I like the contrast of the dark with the light ground of this. So that's why I chose that. I will also tell you, as far as fabric choice, you want to go with a woven. So you want both of these to be cotton woven, which is standard quilting cotton. And you know it's a woven because it's not stretchy. So when you're on the grain of the fabric, there's very little stretch. There's always going to be a little bit more on the cross grain, but whenever you're parallel to your selvage, it's very little stretch. So that's what you want. You want non-directional and cotton woven. So let's lay this out on the cutting board and get it set up to cut out. I have my fabrics ready to go. They're folded on the with the fabric, just like they came off the bolt. I have pressed them out. I've done a little light spray starch, and they're ready to go. And I have gone ahead and put the print on top of the solid, and we're just going to do it all at once. So what I'm going to do is just trace around the pattern and use my disappearing ink pen, which I love this thing. I use these in my embroidery projects and they are fantastic. So you can see, I don't know if you can see that on the video, but yeah, you can see it. So it's like, all I have to do is cut on the line. And now I'm using my fabric scissors. Now I want a nice straight bottom edge, so I'm going to use my quilting roller. I'm going to line it up to that line that I drew, and I'm going to use the rotary cutter. And now that gives me 2 complete napkins already cut out. And to sew, what we're going to do is put them right sides together. You just want to make sure that your print side of your fabric is inside. The pretty side, as they call it, or the right side. So just line up your edges. On your straight side, you're going to want to leave an opening. And what I do to mark an opening so that I don't forget, because it's easy to forget, is I will use a different colored pin. So like all of the pins on around the curve are white, and then on the straight edge I'm going to use the yellow head, and that will let me know to leave an opening. And I'm going to leave about 4 inches so that I can really get in there. And I'm just going to count over 1, 2, 3, 4 and pin it that way. And there you are ready to sew. And then I will put it on the machine, and I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around, and we'll come back and see what that looks like, and I'll show you a couple of things you need to do before you turn the work. I have both of my napkins sewn together, and I used a 2.5 millimeter stitch length, which is a standard stitch length, and you can see I've got a nice even 1/4 inch seam all the way around my little napkin. And you know, as you saw in the video, what you're going to want to do is just take your time going around that curve, and just, you know, slow and steady wins the race. You want a nice even stitch all the way around. Just take your time, and you are going to gently steer. So never push your fabric through the machine, always just gently steer. So before we turn our napkins, we're going to do just a couple of more things, and we're going to snip the corners, and we're just going to take off this extra fabric. We're going to cut very close to the stitch, but we're not going to cut the stitching. And then we might just clip a little bit. We don't really need to do a lot because it's a very gentle curve, but a small bit of a clip is always helpful. So I'm really close, but don't cut your stitches. If you cut your stitches, you're going to have a hole. And you can like trim to just take some of the bulk out of that corner. If you do that, your corners will just lay so much nicer. Just close to the stitches, but not through them, okay? So just that much. And just, you know, little gentle snips. Again, don't cut through your stitch line. Then this is the opening that we left, and you think, oh, it's going to be such a big opening, but really it's not that big. So we just come through and pull the right side out. This is always the most fun part, because then you can see what you made. And then that little point turner I talked about. So I use a knitting needle, or you can use a chopstick, and then they have an actual tool. And you're just going to very, very carefully just find that little corner out. See, let's get it out as much as you can before you start poking. Just want to be like really, really careful, because if you are not gentle when you do this, you'll wind up poking a hole in your corner, and you don't want to do that. Really roll those seams, and we'll take this over to the ironing board and give it a really good press. But let me do the second one next, and then we'll press everything out. When you take your napkin to the ironing board, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to roll those seams, and so you just kind of roll them flat and finger press them open, and it is kind of amazing. It really does help to get that seam completely open, because you want this as rounded as possible. You know, this is a small project. It's going to be a featured part of your table, so we want it to look really nice. And then look how nicely the opening just kind of rolls on itself. And so we want to just kind of make sure that is nice and even. Don't want too much of that blue peeking through to the front. I want it to be nice and even. And we're going to take our hot iron and we'll just press. And the steam iron is great. The flatter that you can get this now, the better it's going to be when we go back to the machine and do our top stitch. All right, so learn to love the press. We're going to sew all the way around, and I like to use a decorative stitch. I have them available to me on the sewing machine, and I like to use them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just continue to line up. This is my 1/4 inch marker, and we're going to come like right here at the corner and put the needle down, and I'm going to just sew all the way around with a decorative stitch. And I'll tell you, if you use the contrasting thread color, which for me it's like a creamy-ish yellowish color, if you use that with a contrasting dark color and you sew on the back, you can really see what you're doing. So I highly recommend that. these are all sewn together, and I want you to see how pretty that decorative stitch is. And on my machine, the little Singer Brilliance, this is number 30. And I just feel it's flowers, but I feel like it looks like little snowballs or something. And it kind of blends in on the print side, but it's fairly dramatic on the contrast side. So once you have your little half circles stitched together, your top stitching done, and when you do this top stitching, that closes your opening. Our last step is we're going to go back to the ironing board with our steam iron, and we're going to press in our fold lines. And this is how we actually make these into our little tree. So let's go and do that now. Here is one of the napkins already pressed out, and you can see how cute that is. And there's your print. And see how your little contrast just peeks through, and then you can just see that little decorative top stitch. So let's look at how to do it. It's you're going to use your pattern, and remember how we came into the 10-inch line and we drew this straight line, and then we drew two 45-degree lines off of that point. Okay, so what you're going to do is have your print side up. Whatever side that you have up, that's going to be the dominant fabric. So if you wanted it to be the solid, you could do the solid. But I want the print to be my dominant. So I'm just going to lay it on there. I'm going to line it up here, and I'm going to look for that line, and it's here. So we're just going to fold it over. Okay, and then here's the other one. You can see it's already folded, and I'm just going to fold that. And you know, it's not going to be perfect at this point. What we're doing is we're just getting an idea. And look, here's my other 45-degree. So I know I want to fold it about there. And that's how you get it. Okay, you're just going to have to play with that a little bit. I'm a little bit challenged in the spatial relations area, so I have to play with things like that a little bit to get them just right. But it will make sense once you kind of play with it some. I know that's super technical. So what you really want to do is you just want to make sure that everything's lined up really nice. I like to make sure that my contrast doesn't peek out at the top, so I'm just kind of making sure that I've got a really nice, neat line. And I think that looks pretty good, because what you're going to do once you have it folded is you're going to take that steam iron and you're going to press down and give it a blast. There's really no substitution in this project for a high-end steam iron, or a good steam iron. And there's our two finished Christmas tree napkins. I think they're adorable. They're super fun. You could make a set of 4 of these in maybe an hour, I would say. And it's a nice hostess gift. It's a nice gift for your neighbors, your family, you know, whatever, whoever. Who wouldn't like to get a little tree? I think it's adorable, and you can really personalize the fabric. And I mean, you can see, you can do something really non-traditional. I just thought this was really fun with the little rocket ships. I thought they looked like Christmas ornaments, and they were in with the Christmas fabric. I got this in my sewing machine store. They have some fabric supplies in there. So anyway, that's where I got this. And I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial, and I hope you are inspired to make some little Christmas trees yourself. It's a really fun Christmas in July project, and you can start sewing these for people on your Christmas list. And I really think like a little set of 4 is the way to go. And that's the video. I appreciate you hanging out. I hope you enjoyed it, and I really hope that you're going to get busy on sewing little Christmas trees. Okay, that's it, and I will see you in the next video.